Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take a huge pile of sources, notes, research, and basically give you the shortcut to being really well informed on a topic. Today, we're not digging into, global politics or the newest AI trend. We're looking at something maybe more, fundamental for getting ahead professionally. It's about the actual language tools you need, how you talk about your career history, your past jobs. And look, we're not talking basic grammar class here. This is more like a strategic analysis. The specific words, the grammar, how you structure the story, how that makes your professional conversation feel, powerful. Persuasive, not just rambling. So our mission today unpacks three main things. First, getting those tricky irregular verbs in the past simple nailed down strategically. Second, getting the right job vocabulary, the words that act like professional shorthand. And third, learning how to structure these stories effectively, especially for those high pressure moments like, the job interview. It's really about being precise, being powerful.
That strategic angle is so important. I mean, the biggest mistake people make isn't necessarily having weak experience. It's often having strong experience, but talking about it weakly. We focus so much on what we did. But if you can't say it clearly, correctly, especially when you're nervous, the message just gets lost. Your credibility takes a hit. And why does this language stuff matter so much? Well, in interviews, reviews, even just networking with important people, linguistic clarity, it signals competence. It shows you pay attention to detail, that you own your achievements. Any little hesitation on a past tense verb or using the wrong job term, it can really weaken your whole point before you even finish talking. So we've structured this deep dive to make sense. We'll start with the mechanics, those essential verbs. Then we build out the vocabulary you need. And finally, we'll spend a good chunk of time looking at real world examples, case studies of career stories to show you exactly how these language pieces fit together strategically.
Okay, let's dive in then. Section 1. The foundation for talking about the past is, the past simple tense. Regular verbs are easy enough, right? Just add hey, ed, mostly. But the real challenge, the thing that separates someone who sounds fluent from someone who sounds hesitant, it's those irregular verbs. They're like the little hurdles in the language.
Exactly. And our source material gives us this really focused list, 16 essential irregular verbs. What's interesting isn't just the list, though. It's that these 16 verbs, they pretty much cover almost every function you need to describe what you did in a job, an accomplishment, a project, a responsibility. This isn't just random grammar homework. It's like an optimized toolkit specifically for talking about your career. Think about it. The past simple tense. It's the tense of completed action. So in a professional setting, that signals things are finished. They were successful. You owned them. When you say, I did a project or I made a report, you're stating those as facts. Done deals. If you avoid these forms, or worse, mix them up with the present perfect, like saying, I have done reports when talking about a job you left years ago. It just creates confusion. And professionals can't really afford that ambiguity.
Yeah, that past simple versus present perfect thing is huge, isn't it? Past simple says, this is done. It's history. Fact. Present perfect. People sometimes misuse it in interviews, right? It can sound a bit vague, like maybe it's still relevant or ongoing, when what the interviewer really wants is solid proof of what you achieved back then, completed stuff.
Precisely. So let's break down these essential verbs by what they do strategically. First up, we've got the verbs of action and creation. These are the big ones. They describe what you actually delivered or put into place. The sources point to do, did, for projects, tasks. I did a major systems review last quarter. Simple. Clear. And make made. This is for things you produce, deliverables, or even impressions. We made a really strong impression on that client, or I made sure all the compliance paperwork was filed on time. Using made, it claims ownership of something tangible you produced.
Okay, and then I'll jump in with the verbs of acquisition and state. These aren't always about doing something external, right? They define your position, your responsibilities, what you gained. The key ones here are have like I had full P&L responsibility for that division, or she had 3 direct reports. And got. This is about receiving or achieving something. I got approval to launch the new product, or he got a promotion after that project, or even I got the job. Choosing had instead of something weaker, it frames responsibility as something you successfully held, not just a list of tasks you were given.
And if have and get set your status, then the verbs of movement and transition describe your career path, your journey. These talk about moving between roles, taking on new challenges, or leaving previous positions gracefully. So we see went. I went back to school part-time for my MBA. Found. I found a way to cut our shipping costs by 15%. That's a great one. And the really crucial transition verb, leave, I left. I left my previous company in 2022 to seek opportunities in this sector. You need left to explain the move clearly without sounding like you're hiding something.
Right. And the last group, we absolutely can't ignore these. the verbs of communication and interaction. I mean, if you work with people at all, clients, colleagues, teams, these are essential. This group includes meet. I met regularly with key stakeholders. Speaker spoke. I spoke at the industry conference last year, or she spoke with the clients directly to resolve the issue. Wrote. And 𝗖𝗿𝗄𝗏. Saying I wrote the project proposal is just clean, competent. If you accidentally say I write the project proposal when talking about a past job, it's a noticeable mistake. It kind of pulls the listener out of your story, doesn't it?
It really does. And the sources really stress knowing these irregular forms instantly, without pausing to think. Think about how they sound in action. She had an interview last week. I got promoted 2 years ago. He gave a great presentation yesterday. The second you stumble over give, gave, or take, took, it just signals a tiny lack of fluency. And unfortunately, in a competitive job market, that can sometimes be misinterpreted, maybe as lack of preparation or even lack of precision in your work.
It's a bit psychological, isn't it? If the language flows smoothly, the listener focuses on what you achieved, the quality of your experience, not on how you're struggling to describe it.
Yeah.
These irregular verbs, they're like the backbone of your professional story. If the backbone's shaky, the whole narrative kind of slumps.
Well put. Okay, so we've got the engine, the grammar. Now we need the right kind of fuel for it.
Okay.
Specific vocabulary. This deep dive gives us 2 really important lists: job titles and workplaces. And connecting these two, that's how you create professional context instantly.
Yeah, and that's so important because job titles are like professional shortcuts, right? They immediately set expectations about what you did. You don't have time in a brief conversation or interview to explain every single task of a, say, shop assistant. But using that title, it instantly categorizes the kind of experience you're talking about.
Absolutely. Let's look at the range of job titles the sources give us. It's pretty comprehensive, which is good. You've got your professional management roles: teacher, doctor, nurse, engineer, accountant, manager. These usually imply specific qualifications, higher level responsibilities. Then there are the skilled trades and service roles: driver, chef, police officer, shop assistant, farmer, factory worker, electrician, plumber. These highlight more hands-on practical skills. And then the more specialized or modern roles: receptionist, software developer, designer, salesperson, business owner, translator. The key thing here strategically is being precise. Our sources really emphasize avoiding vague stuff like "I helped people" or "I worked with money." Instead, use the actual title: "I was a salesperson" or "I was an accountant." The title itself defines the kind of problem solving you were doing.
And that context gets even sharper when you add the second list. The workplace vocabulary. I mean, being a shop assistant in a shop is different from being one in a factory setting, maybe in a company store or something. The environment matters. The sources list common ones: school, hospital, office, restaurant, shop, farm, factory, bank, hotel, and company.
Yeah, and think about the subtle difference between saying "I worked in an office" versus "I worked in a large company." Office just tells me the location. Company, especially large company, that suggests scale, maybe complex structures, probably working across different teams. Or say an accountant, if you worked in a bank. That immediately signals experience with financial regulations, high stakes. An accountant in a factory, probably more focused on cost accounting, production numbers.
Yeah.
The workplace really refines the picture. So the main point here is precision in both your role and the setting. That defines your professional narrative right away. It lets the listener quickly picture the scope and context of your past work.
And the sources give us that nice, simple formula for putting them together. I worked as a job title in a workplace. Straightforward. Let's look at the examples they give, but think about them as strategic communication. I worked as a teacher in a school. Okay, boom. Education, kids or young adults, lesson plans. She was a nurse in a hospital, right? Healthcare, patients, probably high-pressure situations, medical knowledge. He worked as an engineer in a big company. Okay,
Yeah.
Corporate environment, technical projects, maybe teams, scale. That one sentence does so much work. It's like the thesis statement for that job experience.
Exactly. Which brings us nicely into the next section.
Right. This is where it gets really practical, I think. We're moving from just the verbs and nouns to how you actually build a little story and narrative. These templates show exactly how you use that past simple grammar to explain what you actually did, your responsibilities in a past role. It's where the grammar and the vocabulary really come together.
Yeah, we've got 3 really good structured examples here, and we should break them down paying attention to why certain verbs were chosen. These templates use the state verb was, I was a P to set the identity, and then they mix in strong action verbs, some irregular, some regular to show the work performed. Okay, let's start with example 1. This is describing someone who was a shop assistant 5 years ago. The job is defined by selling things and dealing with people, so the verbs reflect that. I was a shop assistant. I worked in a small store. I sold clothes and shoes. I met many customers every day.
See that linguistic fingerprint? The core actions are sold and met. These words instantly tell you it's about generating revenue, sold, and direct public interaction, met. If the main part of the job was, say, stocking shelves, the verbs would be different, maybe organized or stocked or managed inventory. But sold and met, that clearly points to a frontline, customer-facing, sales-oriented role.
Exactly. Now let's contrast that really sharply with example 2, the accountant back in 2018. The verbs here shift completely. It's much less about direct human interaction and more about analysis, output, and the scope of their authority. I was an accountant. I worked for a big company. I made financial reports. I had many responsibilities.
Okay, the key shift from sold met to made had. The accountant's value is shown by what they made, the reports, the analysis, and by what they had the level of responsibility. If this person had said, I helped with reports, it sounds much more junior, doesn't it? Like they were just assisting. But using that strong, irregular verb made, that claims full ownership of creating those reports. That one word does a ton of rhetorical work.
It really does. And our third template, the teacher from 10 years ago, shifts again, this time towards education and communication. The verbs reflect teaching and managing relationships. I was a teacher. I taught English in a secondary school. I gave lessons, I spoke with parents, and I helped students with their homework. The crucial verbs here, taught, gave, spoke. Notice this one uses a mix. Irregulars like gave, spoke, and taught is also irregular. But also a regular one, helped. But the combination clearly defines the job. Teaching knowledge, taught, gave lessons, and managing the stakeholders involved, spoke with parents, helped students. It paints a picture of a pedagogical social role.
So the big takeaway here, I think, is that you don't actually need a long, rambling paragraph to explain what you did in a past job. The specific verbs you choose, they instantly signal the core function and impact of that role. Like if you're applying for a management position now, your stories about past jobs should probably highlight verbs about making decisions, leading teams, implementing things, made, led, chose, implemented. If you're going for a technical role, you'd focus on verbs like fixed, designed, built, developed. The verbs aren't just filler, they're a strategic choice to connect your past experience to the job you want now.
Absolutely. It's about aligning your narrative. And that leads us perfectly into looking at how these narratives build over time through career changes. If we look at the bigger picture now, these two stories the sources provide, Maria and David, they're like linguistic blueprints. They show how you can use this language to illustrate career growth, transitions, building skills over time. A well-told professional history isn't just a list of dates and titles. It shows an active progression using those transferable skills.
Okay, let's unpack Maria's story first. Hers seems like that classic path, right? Starting in service, learning the ropes, and moving up into management.
Right. She starts as a waitress in a small restaurant, stays there 2 years. The language used focuses on gaining those foundational, sometimes overlooked skills. She worked there, okay, simple fact. But then she learned how to serve customers and how to manage stress. Learn it is the key verb there. She didn't just carry plates. She acquired skills like resilience, dealing with pressure, customer interaction, things you can use anywhere. Then her first big step up. Receptionist at a hotel for 3 years. Now the language shifts focus. It becomes about more advanced communication, dealing with diverse people. She met many international guests. Okay, exposure. She spoke English every day. Constant practice. She got better communication. Tangible improvement shown by the verb got. You see the progression. It's like a ladder built with verbs.
Yeah, you can really see the skills stacking up. So after receptionist,
she moves into a role that requires more advice and selling. Travel agent. Now the verbs reflect that active role. She's on a new job. Okay, initiative. She gave advice to tourists, so she's an expert now. And she sold holiday packages. Direct revenue impact. The text also adds, she enjoyed this job, which adds a nice personal touch. Notice the shift from more passive receiving of duties as a waitress to actively giving advice and selling as a travel agent. The language mirrors her increasing professional influence.
Okay, and the final step for Maria.
The peak is becoming a manager in the same travel company. And look how the verbs change again. They become about authority, leadership. She became a manager, she made important decisions, she trained new staff, and logically, she earned more money. The whole arc is shown by the verbs, starting with endurance, learned to manage stress, moving to interaction, met, spoke, then to output, gave advice, sold packages, and finally to influence and control, made decisions, trained staff. Her story is a perfect example of how you use increasingly weighty verbs to show seniority.
That's a great breakdown. Okay, now let's switch to David. His story is different, isn't it? More about skilled trades leading to independence.
Exactly. David's path shows how technical skills can be leveraged into entrepreneurship. He starts as an electrician working in construction for 5 years. The verbs used are very concrete, focused on the physical tasks and problem solving. He worked in construction, he fixed many problems, and he made houses safe. The verbs fixed and made here are strong claims of technical skill and ensuring quality. Very tangible. Then he makes a sideways move, becoming a factory worker. This shows how his electrical skills were transferable. The verbs are still technical, but now focus on maintenance rather than initial building. He got a job in a factory, he maintained the machines, and he repaired equipment when it broke. He's applying his know-how in a different setting.
Okay, so electrician, then factory maintenance. What's the final stage?
The entrepreneurial leap. He becomes a business owner. And listen to the verbs used for this phase. He left the factory. He started his own business. He opened a small repair shop. And the ultimate outcome, he became his own boss. See how the verbs signal decisive action? Left, started, opened. These aren't passive verbs. He took control. He acted. David's story really highlights how technical expertise gives you a foundation, but you need those strong, active, past simple verbs to convey the initiative and, frankly, the courage involved in going out on your own. The shift from using fixed, working for others, to started, working for himself, really tells the whole story.
Wow. So just to pull it all together from Maria and David, if you look at all the key action verbs used in their stories, we've got worked, learned, became, met, spoke, got, gave, sold, enjoyed, made, trained, earned, fixed, repaired, left, opened, started. These verbs are like the milestones marking their growth. They don't just list events, they strategically signal how skills developed and ambition grew over their careers. And it's all done through using the right past simple forms consistently.
Precisely. Which brings us to the ultimate test.
Right. The job interview, we've got the grammar, the vocab, the narrative structure. Now we need to apply it all when the pressure's really on. This is where that fluency and accuracy in the past simple we've been talking about gets seriously tested. Getting this right can literally make the difference in getting hired.
Yeah, and the practice material in our sources is really useful here because it anticipates the kinds of things interviewers actually ask. They don't just want a list of tasks. They dig into context, your opinions, relationships, why you made certain moves. Let's look at those 5 general reflection questions they suggest. See how they force you to use specific grammar points strategically. Number 1, what was your first job? Simple enough, but it needs that state verb was to set the scene, then probably some past simple action verbs to describe it briefly. 2, where did you work 5 years ago? This uses the auxiliary did, which means you have to use the base form of the verb, work. And it asks for a specific place, pulling from that workplace vocabulary list we talked about. 3, who was your first boss? Again, using was to talk about past dates, relationships, how the organization was structured. 4, did you like your last job? Why or why not? This one's critical. It asks for an opinion, and then you have to justify it using action verbs in the past. Yes, I liked it because I managed my own projects, or no, not really because I found the work repetitive, using found or did. And 5, did you ever leave a job to find a better opportunity? This directly tests that key irregular verb, leave, left, and asks about your motivation for making a change.
It's clever, isn't it? Those 5 questions cover time, feelings, people, places, and actions. They're designed to get you talking about both the state of things, using was, and the actions you took, using all those irregular verbs. If you can answer those 5 smoothly, without hesitation, it sends a really strong signal to the interviewer about your communication skills.
Absolutely. But the real gold standard is shown in the structured answers they provide for that mock interview role play. Let's break down the 3 most common core interview questions and see how the answers nail it using our toolkit. First, the classic opener. Tell me about your last job. The suggested answer is beautifully concise. I was a sales assistant. I worked in a shop. I sold clothes. Look at that. 3 short sentences, 3 key pieces of info. Roll what? Setting, worked, primary action, sold, all using perfect past simple. It's clear, direct, sets a competent tone right away.
Okay, then the next level question, digging into your actual experience. What experience did you have in your previous company? This isn't just about the title, it's about what you achieved. The example answer lists accomplishments. I had 5 years of experience, I met clients, I made reports, and I gave presentations. This is where that time travel toolkit really shines, right? You've got the irregular verbs had, met, made, gave. It's like presenting a mini portfolio of things you successfully completed.
And this is also where you see the power of I made reports, past simple done deal, versus maybe saying I was making reports. Past continuous sounds a bit less finished, less impactful. While past continuous isn't wrong, the past simple just sounds more assertive. It declares the accomplishment as a finished fact. And finally, that often tricky question, why did you leave your last job? This can feel like a trap, but it's really a test of professionalism. The recommended answer is SMART. It avoids any negativity about the old job and focuses entirely on positive ambition. I left because I wanted a better opportunity. It uses the irregular verb left correctly. And crucially, it frames the past decision entirely in terms of looking forward, seeking growth, which is exactly what a hiring manager wants to hear.
So the bottom line really is talking effectively about your competence, your ambition. It's directly tied to getting your grammar right, specifically the past simple. You have to show not just that you did the work, but that you can talk about that experience clearly, confidently, and strategically using the precise verbs and structures we've been unpacking.
Exactly. So we've covered a lot today. Let's just quickly recap the main pillars we looked at for building that strong professional narrative. First, we really hammered home the need to master those key irregular verbs, knowing instantly that make becomes made, go becomes went, speak becomes spoke. These are the words you use to claim your actions. Second, we talked about the lexicon matching specific job titles, like accountant, engineer, with specific workplaces like bank, factory, to create immediate, clear context. Precision matters. And third, we looked at the narrative patterns, using structures like I was I worked in, I met clients, I left because, to combine those state and action verbs into a story that flows and has impact. The key principle through it all. When you talk about your career history, use the past simple. Use specific vocabulary. Assert your accomplishments as completed facts.
So, what does all this mean for you, the listener? Well, being able to talk about your professional past accurately, fluently, it's not just about sounding good, it's strategic. When you speak precisely about your history, you project confidence, you show mastery, you demonstrate control over your career narrative. Now, just one final thought to leave you with, something to maybe mull over. It builds on this idea of choosing your narrative. We talked about David's story, the electrician who left the factory and started his own business. The source material used those strong factual verbs. Left, started, totally correct. But think about the personal decision, the risk involved in that leap. If you were writing David's biography, not just a resume summary, what other verbs might you use to capture the emotional side of that journey? The past simple can carry that weight too. Maybe he dared to leave. Maybe he risked everything. Maybe he hoped for a better future. Think about your own career path. What verbs beyond just the factual descriptions really capture the motivation, maybe the courage behind your own big decisions or transitions? Try articulating your story with that kind of strategic depth. Practice it. We'll see you next time for another deep dive. Goodbye and happy learning.